That's not even Barrett, is it? Number 45, the other one.
Was it?
Barrett's 58, I think.
There was Pierre Paul,
No, that's number
who
9.
busts his hand up.
Yeah, he had a great game too.
Well, and everyone who scored wasn't on that team last year.
Okay, we are live. Feel free to start when you're ready. Go for lunch.
For lunch. Good evening. Welcome to the February 8th, 2021 Henrietta Town Board Workshop Meeting. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Here.
Councilmember Stafford.
Here.
Councilmember Safranek,
Here.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Here.
Supervisor Schultz.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Still a little cold, huh, bud?
So again, it's going to be a busy night Wednesday with 5 special use permits, although 2 of them at least are related. And we'll be beginning at 5:30 p.m. There are no presentations and no public hearings. For item 3, for the collection of ethics disclosure forms. So as you recall, we had been working on reworking our code of ethics portion of the local law to include ethics disclosure forms, or also known as conflict of interest forms. We switched to using ethics disclosure forms since that's how they're referred to in the general municipal law. Rather than enact the code and then do it based off of that, we thought we wanted to go through the cycle once to see if there were any changes we wanted to make before we, set it in stone, so to speak.
Okay.
So in talking with Don, he said that we can authorize it with a resolution for the collection this year. There won't be any teeth, so to speak, other than maybe an official rebuke, but I actually don't think that's a huge issue. Again, especially the first time where people aren't used to the process, I'd rather them not have as much worry, for lack of a better way to put it. I don't really see this as a worry thing at all, but I can say that all I want, people will still be worried. So, as someone who's been on a lot of boards, I filled a lot of these out. And again, based on that experience, I used ones that, of all the boards I've been on, it was primarily the one that I found the easiest to do, and therefore it had the best. There was absolutely a correlation between the ease at which there was to fill it out and the rate at which they were filled out accurately.
Okay.
So I went with the one that I found that was the best of those boards. That was the RIT one. And then we folded in the whole ethics board, went over it and brought over some stuff from others. And so we put together the one that we've got now. And that's, if you recall, we had it up for discussion to change the local law. But there were some issues with the punishment portion that we felt it was too severe. And then I don't remember what exactly happened. It might have been the 2018 election cycle.
Right.
Or 2019, excuse me, election cycle that, because Ken then stepped down as part of that. So it kind of sat on the back burner during COVID. We want to pick it back up and get it moving. So like I said, we felt that this was the best way to, let's do a trial run. It worked really well for how we did our solar code. There were things we found out in that process that we said, you know what, if we'd have implemented it this way, it would have been too cumbersome. So like I said, I think that's it's kind of the approach I want to take. And again, it would be anybody who is on a discretionary board. So that's That would be like the zoning board, planning board, town board. Whether we want to extend it to all the boards like youth and rec advisory and the others, that's up to us. And then all of the department heads are who I have targeted right now to fill it out. I don't remember which way to be honest, which way the resolution as to whether those other advisory boards are on the list or not. It's definitely any board that has discretionary power, has, some authority to make rulings, is on the list. I don't remember whether I included the
I
advisory.
thought it
boards.
was the 3 main boards and then the department heads.
That's what I think, but I just my point is, when we think of those, we have to think of them we don't have to. In my opinion, we should think of those as differently. It's not to say at some point we might not want to later extend it to those other boards, but for the first go around, I think we were talking just the 3 main boards and the department heads.
That makes sense.
Any other questions on that?
It's, town board, planning board, zoning board, board of ethics, and department heads and directors.
We kind of figure that this is one of the things I've always said Congress should do, that they should have to be subject to their own laws. So the Board of Ethics felt that if they're going to make everybody else fill these out, that they should fill them out themselves. Go ahead.
Most amazing thing I learned from Congress, I think it might have been 3 or 4 years ago, they said, from now on, when there's things that we're voting on that has to do with companies, you can't buy stocks and you can't act ahead. I said, what do you mean? Everybody else has been doing that the whole time. You
I know.
guys just getting around to barring yourself from doing that?
Yep.
No wonder you have so much money.
Number 4.
Supervisor?
Yep, sorry.
Just wanted to ask you, on the special permits, can I bring up just a few things on those real quick?
Sure.
Okay. Just looking at my notes. On the High Falls Tree Service, I saw in a letter attached for backup, I think it was the fire marshal may have said that the subject lot was residential, but the application says industrial. I don't know
So
what the right answer is
the
there.
former use on it was residential. That whole area has been rezoned industrial.
Yep.
So as I understand it, it had been under a pre-existing non-conforming use. So obviously the instant they convert that, it will never be able to go back to residential. It's my understanding.
Yeah, but it's undeveloped at this point. There's the middle lot and then the 2 outside lots. One is they're both vacant. One is a treed lot and one looks like it's a field.
Yeah, so the one that was to the south was the one that they had already come in and talked to us
Yeah.
about. They were gonna do a mini storage on it.
And we approved it, I think, right?
We did approve it. Well, again, this is one of the things, I don't remember whether the mini storage required a special use permit or not, because it's in industrial.
Mhm.
There was another one further south that they wanted to rezone. It was the one, there was like all these industrial parcels,
Yep.
one residential parcel, then the power lines and the throughway and so they asked, could we rezone them to make them like all the other parcels in there?
That one I
section.
remember, yeah.
So that one we definitely went through. Chris Martin, I don't know if you recall whether, I know we had a special use permit or one of the clerks if they happen to know. But I don't remember if the special use permit was for the mini storage or for the tree service.
I know we didn't get a special permit for the tree service. This is Chris Martin. It was about that time we were going through some code changes with storage, multi-storage units. I kind of thought we went for a special use permit for that, but I'll be honest, Steve, we had so many back then, it was kind of hard to remember.
Yeah, so it's.
But I know,
Go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so it sounds like they may have come in for the the mini storage, they absolutely talked about the tree service at the time. Now, again, the original intent was that the center parcel was going to be the tree service, and the southern parcel was going to be the mini storage. But it sounds like that the tree service is taken off. And with all the other competition in the mini storage, I think it sounds like they decided rather than get into that business, they'll just expand the tree service portion.
Okay.
That's correct.
And it's industrial, right? Because like I said, it
It is
does.
zoned, it is in an industrial zone.
Okay.
I thought the mini storage was on 385
That's,
and they were applying for 395 or vice versa.
the other two parcels do not have an address, is the confusion.
But regardless, the map they submitted makes it clear what they're trying to do,
Correct.
in my opinion.
So with that, does that mean that they will no longer be able to build a mini storage there?
If they switch to this, that is correct.
I mean, theoretically, they could knock this down and apply for mini storage.
They
They
didn't,
want-
well, because they haven't started the construction on that, once a year goes by,
Yeah,
that special use permit becomes null and void. If we want to at this one, we can make it clear, because I think they're coming into, again, they're essentially amending that special use permit. It's a new one, I get it, but my point is they're modifying what they were going to do. So I mean, when we do the resolution,
we can declare that this
we can
supersedes.
declare that
or-
it supersedes
yeah.
the previous one,
So we don't have two outstanding.
right?
Because, like I said, because I saw that it was two different properties and I just wondered if, hey, we give them approval for this and then they'll be back for the other one again. That's what my.
I mean, they
concern
could
was.
come back for the north one if they want. It's
Right.
zoned properly.
But if they come back for that, then you make a decision on that. I mean, there's nothing, they're not affecting the northern property. They can do what they want with it. This is just that, like I said, this is replacing the previous approval they got because like I said, at the time they did that, they were one of the first ones in, but then, like I said, there was another mini storage just down the road from them. There was the mini storage at the former Circuit City. There was another mini storage somewhere else. So there's a lot of mini storages that all went in around the same time. Wouldn't surprise me if they looked at it and said, you know what, it's just not, with how well the tree's taken off, it's not worth getting into that business. Which I'd rather them cater to the business that is growing and not to the business that could potentially fold under, and then you have a bunch of empty buildings. So I'm all for them, if this is doing well, switching the special use permit to this. So we'll look up that other number and have it for the meeting so that when we, at that approval, we can basically say that this supersedes the previous
Okay.
special use permit.
So to the counselor's point, we're sure that this is industrial. It's not residential at all.
Positive it's industrial.
I just saw a letter in there from, I think someone must have been confused. I'm not sure.
So again, when they purchased it, it was residential.
Yeah.
I suspect. Well, I don't know when they purchased it, but in other words, there's no question 385 used to be residential. The whole area used to be residential. It was declared industrial somewhere in the 2000s, if I remember correctly. I don't know if you remember that, Chris. Because we went, that's when we were looking at that web.
I think it was before the school district built the garage there. I think it was about that time where it changed over from residential to industrial.
And so I suspect in other words, I wouldn't be surprised if on whatever deed they have or whatever they have, it said residential.
Just outdated.
It's just outdated.
Gotcha.
But if you pull up our zoning map, it's crystal clear, it's industrial.
Okay, thank you.
100%.
And then the other thing I wanted to bring up is on the next one, the Lehigh mixed-use development. They applied for the multifamily special use permit. But I think under our new code, they would also have to apply for a mixed-use special use permit.
I thought so when we did that, did they need two special use permits?
I thought that's what we decided.
Well, in other words, I know they have to do the mixed-use development. I thought that's what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that, do they then need an additional special use permit for I thought if they were doing it at the same time,
The code doesn't seem to make a distinction based on time, from what I could tell. And I remember we made that decision early on to have it be two separate special permits. I can't exactly remember why, but
I know that we did it if they weren't, we definitely wanted to have that ability so that if because we didn't want to grant approval for the apartments on a typical development plans. We wanted to do it based on actual. And so, I think that the idea was if they don't have those plans fully done, they could get their mixed use special use permit, start building, and when they were ready and had a client for the multifamily, they could come in. I seem to be under the recollection that it would be the same, although again, we could do it like we do for the restaurants, right?
give them multiple ones.
Where we just do them both at the same hearing.
I think the code isn't sufficiently sort of distinctive on the timing that you're talking about, so I would be more comfortable with them just getting both. And I think we could interpret their application that way, to be requesting both.
Sure.
It didn't jump out with me though in their application materials if they specifically, unless it's like buried on one of their maps, specified the percentages on the component uses.
It is somewhere.
Is it somewhere?
Because they were
Okay.
doing it by acreage. So the northern parcel, I know I've seen it. The
Okay.
southern parcel is predominantly industrial.
Yeah, I know
They were
that.
going to extend the trail through there, so there was going to be some civic space there. The northern parcel was, I want to say 20% civic, and the northern parcel then was in like 40% residential, and then the southern parcel was the other 40% industrial, something like that.
Okay,
It is around somewhere,
okay,
but we can get them to make it crystal clear.
okay. Good. I just want to clarify that ahead of tomorrow or Wednesday, so we know exactly what we're doing.
Right. I thought on these, when we talked about that mixed use, it was going to be all one parcel. This is a parcel that is one on one side of the street and then on the other side of the street, correct?
We developed the code to allow multiple parcels to
Right.
So you
comprise.
could,
a
we
single
could,
use.
how far away can those parcels be?
They have to be
Miles or-
contiguous.
Okay, okay.
Now, we allow, in other words, it can span a street, just
Yeah.
as a parcel can span a street. But, we looked at as you start to look at this stuff, often from an ownership standpoint, after you create the thing, you bring in a industrial customer who wants to own their building, you're gonna have to parcel it out, right?
Which we also allow, so
Which
long
we
as
allow,
it
right.
carries forward with the mixed use.
Right. So
plan.
the mixed use permit umbrella is on all of the 3 parcels and any future subdivisions of those parcels. And anytime they want to change any one portion of that, it has to still meet the overall special use permit
Right.
from the get-go. So the idea being, if I've created, remember, there's 2 different ways that you can split up the mixed use. I can either do it by acreage, so I can say this portion of the land is residential, this portion is civic, this portion is industrial. Within that industrial bounds, I just have to meet the rules of that industrial portion. If I wanted to, for instance, put a retail store there, I've now changed the use by a percentage standpoint, so now they would have to come back to the town board and update the mixed use special permit to include 10% retail. And part of it, we would look at all the parcels. We wouldn't treat them in as a separate parcel. We would look at all the parcels in together. And if that pushed them below a threshold, it could get denied, or they would have to convince one of the other parcel owners to maybe add something or give something up in order to get to that, to get within the boundaries. So we had this concept, I often referred to it as a super parcel, but it's basically, it's the bounds of the original application. and contains all parcels therein.
Yeah, we call it a composite parcel, I believe.
You're right.
Um,
And so that has to be defined in this special use permit for the mixed use, is what those project boundaries are for that composite parcel. The second method is by square foot, and that's more like Park Point. So in this case, it's retail on the first floor, apartments on the second floor and up. I obviously can't do that one by acreage because those buildings are mixed. The buildings themselves are mixed, right? So one form of mixed use is that within a project area, I have different buildings with different uses. That's the acreage method. The square footage is I've got buildings that themselves have mixed uses. That's the square footage method. Incidentally enough, I'm encouraging the mall to come in with a mixed use development. Right now, the application was done by the Cornerstone for their apartments. They didn't quite get it right. Not everybody fully understands the civic space part of the concept. So they looked and said, oh, there's going to be this big lawn in front of the apartment near the creek, and that's our civic space. No, that's your green space within the residential portion, right?
Right.
Within that, there's still a requirement to have a particular portion of green for residential, which I think is typically higher than the amount of green that's required around industrial, or the green that's required. That's not the same as civic space. I pointed out to them that if they do the whole mall, and I've spoken with the Wilmerite folks, and they are up for doing this. If we look at the whole mall, I don't know how you guys feel, I'd be willing to say that that center mall portion is civic space, as is the food court. And I said, furthermore, if you were to put tables around one of those nice big green pond areas, that could also be considered civic space, right? That there's a bunch of stuff we could do in that regards. And then obviously the stores would be retail. You've got U of R, which would be medical. This would be residential. And that they could add additional future things. But again, when we look at what the whole concept behind that revitalization, the mixed use revitalization area, I think is what it was called. That was it. It was to give them more flexibility to bring in other stuff. So rather than narrow it down to just that one project, let's do the whole mall. And that way, as new things come in, they can bring it in under that umbrella. They'll have to come back here when they want to bring in something. In other words, let's say they lay it out now as this is all retail. If they want to convert one of those retail areas to more housing or, light industrial or a hotel, something along those lines, if it changes its classification, they'd have to come back in. But again, that would just be come back in, we look at it and say, yep, this is still in the spirit of the original concept. You're good to go.
Gotcha.
So like I said, though, we should be seeing, hopefully they'll be updating that application soon. And then basically the Cornerstones special use permit would actually be for the multifamily, that's the senior housing portion of that.
But my point there though was just to make sure, I would encourage the applicant to go revisit the special use code or the mixed use code and just make sure they sort of check off the boxes on all it being a new and somewhat complex code,
Sure.
to make sure they check all the boxes off.
Sure. Now, the good news is we're going to be hearing the application. There's going to be some time because we already told them we're not going to be making a decision at this meeting. There's
Okay.
some additional stuff that had to come back from a seeker standpoint. I have that right, Chris? Is that correct? And or Becky?
Nope, that's correct, Steve. They have to, we're not gonna make any decisions at this meeting.
We had already informed them that, and I basically said, this is new, we haven't heard any public feedback on this yet. I don't know what there's going to be. I look at this as much preferable to the old giant mixed use, or excuse me, market rate and senior and special housing that was going to be there. There were just so many units there. So I see this as preferable to what was there, but you know, who knows what we're going to get from residents. And so I basically told them I wasn't planning on calling for a resolution at this one, and based off of previous town boards behavior on similar things, I said I wouldn't be the least bit surprised. So we've already laid the expectations that there's going to be no decision made at this meeting.
When we talked about this mixed use, at the time we were doing the changes, you know, I envisioned it, or the way it was brought up is you'd have a place to, you know, you have a place to work and a place to live, and then some retail in there. See, they're going after obviously, the apartments first. Do we have any idea how long until they will start developing the industrial part?
No, one of the things that is being held up a little bit on it is there's discussion as to whether to do a road that connects East River Road more or less directly across from the southern entrance to Riverwood Tech Campus around through the adjacent parcels over to John Street. There are advantages to that for alleviating some of the congestion at the intersection of Lehigh Station and East River Road. The problem is it requires the coordination of 3 different developers.
Okay.
So that one's going to take a little time to work out. When we had those discussions about this, one of the things we talked about is that we talked about whether there was a timeline that they were forced to finish the other phase of the projects. And I remember distinctly asking the crowd, well, most people don't want land developed. Is it that big a deal if something sits empty? It can't be done for anything else other than what's inside this plan.
I remember
If
that.
for 10 years it sits empty, I got to believe all the neighbors on there, that's their preference. They'd rather us not rush them to get something in there.
I would,
So, you know, there was sort of this feeling, well, is this a way for people to build apartments? But again, if the price to build apartments is that you have 40% or more of the land sitting undeveloped, I think most residents would agree that is highly preferable to the way it used to be, where the whole parcel, wall to wall, would be apartments. So now 40% of it's sitting empty, or at some point would potentially be office parks. In terms of the whole area, there is no question that there's a ton of office parks there already. So this idea that, you know, that we're somehow violating the original concept of the employment area with the amount of industry that's there today, I don't see that there's a big issue. In other words, there's no housing in that zone right now. And so adding some housing moves us closer to the goals. I don't feel a strong need to rush the development of the industrial portion along. The key we have to do is hold steadfast, and they can't come in and then obviously they can't put more apartments on there. They'll have exceeded the threshold.
Right.
You know, could they decide to put a small retail, either in the northern or southern parcel? They absolutely could. You know, don't know exactly what they're looking to do, but
I would just,
go ahead.
I would just think in the spirit of the way we wanted to have work and housing, that you'd wanted to, that the the businesses would be developed first and then, oh, they're building apartments across the street. I'm going to go live across the street from my work versus build the apartments and then, you know, I have a job and then
Right.
a place opens up across the
So
street.
I agree with that, except that again, there are probably 20 to 25 existing businesses all within walking distance of these apartments. Between Riverwood Tech Campus, John Street Extension, Tech Park Drive, or Park Center Drive, or whatever it's called, Park Center, and then the new Wiregrass. In fact, there's three parcels, I think it's 2 companies. 3 of those parcels are being developed. The 2 parcels are being merged for a large industrial. And then there's a second normal size industrial going in there. And again, those are immediately adjacent to this development. And like I said, across the street is Riverwood Tech Campus, where also there's potentially, well, he has plans. I don't think he's submitted for the approval yet, but he has drawings for
The new building.
adding a new building to Tech Campus. I think it's stalled right now due to COVID.
Well, I understand exactly what Mr. Stafford's saying. Probably from a funding standpoint, it's probably easier for the builder to build the apartments, get some money in his hands, go in and then put the industrial park in there. I don't really see a problem
Right.
with the industrial not being there ahead of time either.
I think part of it's not just what you just said, but it's also, remember, so typically people build one or the other. It's rare you find builders who focus on both, or developers, I should say. There are some, but typically someone develops housing or someone develops industrial park. So there are often some who do both. This particular developer who's leading the effort here is much more on the housing side. So I'm sure what he's going to do, unless he decides to get into the industry portion himself, he will probably reach out to some of the other industrial developers in the area and say, hey, would you help me develop the industrial portion of this as well? I suspect they will say yes after I've finished filling my parcels over here. Like if he went to Lefroy. Lefroy would probably say, I'll do that right after I fill out Wiregrass. Now, it might be that they then get a customer that's too big to fit on Wiregrass, and he says, oh, well, I happen to have this other parcel over here where we can lay that all out. So again, I don't know for certain what they're going to do, which way they're going to go, but like I said, to get that, to develop that, especially to answer the questions with regards to the road, we are going to, that's going to take coordination between Lefroy, Jane's Riverview, and who's the name of these guys?
Corners,
No.
Commercial Street.
Commercial Street Partners. So it's going to take the coordination of those 3 entities to figure out the path of the road, how the costs are going to be split, that type of stuff. And then also, by the way, the Monroe County DOT is involved in there. So one of the things you're going to see, and I'm just bringing this up now because I know some people don't like to see stuff switch, but we're going to do it based on our best bets now. It is distinctly possible that the entrances will shift according to Monroe County DOT, because if they don't build that road through, if it's just an entrance into that office park, then they probably will eventually get rid of the light on the southern entrance of Riverwood Tech Campus. And if that's the case, then they don't want a 4-way intersection, because if it's uncontrolled, it actually makes it worse. They'll want to offset that entrance. So the way been talking with the county about it, the way we'll approve it is that based on, because again, this is typical for that we don't know exactly what's going to be in there, but it's going to be based off of these plans and this, the road being there. So we'll have them lined up. But again, they're not going to build that until they get close to that. And before they get there, they've got to figure out with the other two developers as to what's going to happen with that road. One thing I will say, there was talk under my predecessor of the town building that road. I don't want to see the town build that road. That to me is not an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars. I think those three developers, it will help them. Don't get me wrong, it'll also help the town from a traffic standpoint. And I'm willing to do the work to help make it happen. But that should be the developer's money, because essentially that road becomes the center of their office park. When it's all said and done, I don't have a problem with that road being dedicated if they want to dedicate it.
Right.
And whether that goes to us or the county. Is John Street Extension county or town?
John Street itself is kind
So the
County,
county, okay. So yeah, if it were the continued extension of John Street, its potential, it could become a county road. Like I said, I have no issue doing that, taking it over, but it doesn't make sense to me for us to build it, which essentially I look at that's too much of a gift to the developers, because then they're off the hook of having to build their own road in their
Right.
office park. So
will that southern portion of that property be deed restricted? So in 20 years, another town board can't come along and say, okay, you can build more apartments there if they don't develop it
It
in the
will be,
meantime?
it's industrial now, so it's zoned. I mean,
right.
So
So
I'm just.
deed restricted isn't the right term, and to be honest, deed restricted doesn't
Okay, well,
have as much control as you think it is. It's again,
it's
it's
current,
under this special use permit. And so they can only use, anything they do there has to meet the requirements of the special use permit. Could another town board come along and rezone the area to R215? They absolutely could.
okay.
There's no way to
Okay,
prevent
just wanted
that.
to make, okay.
But-
So they can hang on to it. They can hang on to it for a while and then.
Right, but even if
possibly
they
get it
built
rezoned.
industrial buildings there, someone could come along, rezone it R215, they could knock all the buildings down and put up all apartments. There's nothing you can do to prevent a future town board from changing the way we do stuff. With the sole exception, if you could somehow get it into the New York State Constitution, like Adirondack State Park. Based on how much trouble they have with that, I don't think the state would ever do that again.
How long a road would that be approximately, you know?
How long would the road be?
Yeah. to get over
Half a
town.
mile, maybe.
Okay.
I'd have to go back and look, but
Okay.
it's whatever the distance is, a little bit more than the distance from John Street to, it might even be as much as a mile. Well, because John Street Extension curves to the west. So yeah, I'd say maybe half a mile to 3/4 of a mile.
Okay.
And like I said, the nice thing is anybody who's coming to this industrial park from the west or from the south would completely avoid that intersection. Furthermore, anybody who's coming into that office park from the north might avoid having to make the left turn there, go straight through the intersection and turn at this southern entrance. That the sight lines at that intersection, because of the terrain, are not the best. And so the more traffic we can route around that intersection, the better. So like I said, I would love to see them to be able to do this, but we'll see what happens.
Interesting.
We did have a really good meeting with the Monroe County DOT. We're all on the same page in terms of working on the East River Road corridor to try to get it flowing as best as we possibly can.
Great.
So that's good news that, like I said, that we had a meeting that went long because we just kept going on to other topics of the corridor. But I mean, it was really very productive. So like I said, we'll see what happens. Any other questions on that one?
Greg?
Yep, absolutely.
Hi, Craig Eckert, Deputy Town Supervisor. I just wanted to also get back to Middle Road, Middle Storage. That property was a little bit of a headache, just so everybody knows, because it came in and was approved for the self-storage. They went out, started, they dug the hole, put the stone down, created the pad, and then kind of walked away. And then they started operating the tree service out of it. So I made sure with Kevin that they were properly permitted to run the service or whatever else they were supposed to do. So it was kind of one of those things that started to become one project and then stopped. I've talked to the owner at least a half dozen times in the last year to try to get that approved and have a set of plans that we can approve and, operate off of. And it's been about a year to get him to do that. So I'm glad that he's here. There wasn't a stop work order or anything that I could put on him, even though I would have liked to, but there wasn't any other work that was stopping him from doing it.
Right.
We did make him move a berm, the county made him pave the entrance through this construction period. And, we got it cleaned up and tidied up to a degree. And just getting him in to get this paperwork done has been about a year to do. So I'm glad that it's happening, but it's been a little bit of a fight.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, they did have approval to do the tree service on half the project. So the fact it's kind of gets into this, they absolutely didn't have updated plans. What they were doing didn't match their plans. But again, it's not like they weren't approved to do a tree service on their properties. They were just going bigger than their original plans. Okay. Number 4, let me go back. Are you all done with all the special use permits?
Yeah, thanks for going back. I just want to
Yep, no
clarify a few
problem.
things.
Number 4, lead agency aptitude. So this is another one. This one is student housing. Again, they are doing it under the mixed use. This is the Larkin property. The easternmost edge is going to be their industrial. I was trying to work with Larkin, Wallman, and Lefroy to see if they could put some kind of industrial road out the eastern side of the parcel. They weren't able to come to any kind of agreement to do that. Terrain and drainage make it difficult. It's easier to come out of the Wallman property, but the Wallman haven't gotten as far as Larkin in terms of developers. As a result of that, all the traffic from this would go out onto East River Road. For the student portion, that's not as big a deal because student housing typically provides less. So one of the things when we're considering doing that special use permit for the housing, if we're doing it based on the fact that it is student housing, it's important that in the special use permit is for student housing. And not just any apartments, because what we don't want to have happen, and we've done all the seeker study, all of the seeker mitigation, all the work, all the plans based on the idea that it's going to be student housing, and then a year down the road, they come and switch it.
Right, and I think we can point out that our assessment was based on, traffic consistent with student housing, noise, lights consistent with student housing, hours, all the stuff that would be consistent with student housing as opposed to other types of housing.
Right. Because to be honest, if this one went market rate, with that market rate up front and the industrial in the back, I think it would be too much of a burden out on East River Road. They're going to have a challenge already because where they currently have proposed for their entrances, they do not have good sight lines. So in talking with Monroe County DOT, there's 2 locations that would work well for an entrance. One is the existing driveway for this property. There's a house on this property that that's separated out. It's parceled out already. The driveway kind of comes through the edge of this property. That's actually the best location. So one of the things when we have discussions, basically I haven't had a chance to take that feedback back to the aptitude, but I want them to consider bringing the road out where that driveway is and bringing the driveway into the road instead of out to East Henrietta. Because basically, as it shouldn't be surprising to anybody, where did the farmers build their houses? They built them at the tops of the hills. So at the crest of that hill, you can see in both directions. As soon as I move off of that crest, it's a steep drop. So I'm blindside. If I move to the north, I'm blindsided from the south. And if I move south, I'm blindsided from the north. The only place, and it's like only a 30, 40 foot wide crest. Only place that has access, well, I guess if you demolish the house and went through the house itself, but is that driveway entrance. Now, because of fire codes, they're gonna have to have a second entrance. The best place for the second entrance is actually directly opposed to Eagle View Lane or whatever it's called, which is the entrance to the lodge. That's not directly across from there, is not their parcel. It actually belongs to the folks who are coming in for the special use permit for the Lehigh mixed use development, the Commercial Street Partners. So I've reached out to them whether they would consider essentially selling a sliver of their parcel to the Larkin so that their entrance could come out there. Haven't heard back yet, but that's a couple things we're looking at, because right now, if they can't find a solution for those driveways, I don't know that I'm willing to approve this application. I think it's potentially dangerous, especially since we're talking shuttle buses full of students making those turns in and out. I would hate for one to be turning and get blindsided by someone coming up over the hill. So, I'd want to take a look at that. At least one of the main entrances is in one of those protected areas. The great thing about if we could get it at the light, then we could make the northern entrance right in, right out on the top of the hill. And just avoid left turns altogether. So whether at that point, if you could get the one at the light, the other one doesn't have to go through the driveway. Because if that's right turn, right out, right in, right out, I can move it south of the crest, because now I don't have to worry, I'm not making a left turn, so I don't have to worry about the southbound blind spot, right? If I can only turn right, I can see all the way to the bottom of the hill and beyond.
Right.
So, and then the idea would be that left turns only can come out of the southern entrance at the light. So we'll, at this point, we're just declaring lead agency, but those are some of the questions I hope to have answered before they come in here for the meeting. Because that's the thing I see is the biggest issue with this one.
I guess one of my concerns too is this, just that it sounds like there's two major developments that want to go in the same area, and the seeker review, is that going to take into consideration the other developments that are going in? And being that this is the time of COVID, we know that there's lighter traffic and all of that sort of thing. Is that it going to be taken into account? I mean, because they've really got to inflate the numbers, if you will, to represent an accurate picture of what traffic is going to look like.
So they don't have to inflate the numbers. What they do is they start from the last studies that were done pre-COVID and measurements done pre-COVID.
And
Taking measurements now during COVID is useless.
so, I mean, there's been a lot of development that has gone in and is continuing to go in. Those measurements, do they look at all of the development that has gone in and take that into consideration? And
They
add
do.
that in?
So that is it. Do they call that background growth? There's two types of growth. One is from specific developments that they know have been in the area. And then the other one, I guess it's the non-background, right? Then the background is just overall, the county traffic is up 3%. So they'll take all the numbers, they'll jack it up 3%. Then they will add all the trips from the other ones. So absolutely, the Larkin development, in other words, these two developments, they should be looking at, if they're fully built out, they include each other. If they haven't done that, I'm sure Terry Rice will catch that.
Yeah, this is Chris Martin again, Steve, if I may add that the developer's engineer for that site did reach out to us, and we gave them copies of the traffic studies for, several of the areas along East River Road. So they know what's going on with the other developments, and they can use those numbers when they generate their traffic reports for us and the county to review.
So basically, like I said, we know that, the stuff that's happening south of the thruway, the new houses, there is some percentage of that traffic that is continuing northbound on East River Road. That gets taken into account. The growth that happened at Riverwood Tech Campus prior to the pandemic, that will get added into the stuff. So all those things, they all have trip counts. They know what's coming out. That just gets added to the last measured trip counts. And again, they also grow it by not just those specific trips, but they grow it by a background factor that looks at just the overall increase in traffic due to the general accumulation of traffic from across the town.
Do we have, I see it's going to be 200, or it's proposed for 202 units there. Do we know how many kids are going to live in each? I mean, how many students are going to be there? So we don't know if they could be a 4-bedroom unit, all 4 bedrooms.
I mean, presumably they'll have more details on that, and
Okay.
certainly that's, if they don't have it in the material, that's a question you absolutely ought to ask when they're here.
Okay, I didn't see
But
it.
I don't know it. That's not to say it's not in that packet somewhere.
Right.
I just don't know it off the top of my head. Again, the action this week is just declaring intent to be lead agent. So that we're the one who get to do the seeker, and especially, well, for one, because it's a multi-use, it automatically is us. Even if it wasn't, I'd want to do it just because, again, as you point out, we've got a development at the parcel right next door. And oh, by the way, for years now, Wallman, who's the next parcel to the north, has been talking about developing his. I don't know where that's going or not going. He's had a couple nibbles at the worm, but no one on the hook, as I understand it. So,
So what about this application that we're looking at on Wednesday for the Lehigh mixed-use development? Are we reviewing the seeker for that one this week, or?
so again, this is more the public hearing.
Okay,
I want you to look over the seeker, and if you have questions from the seeker, to address those questions.
okay.
But we're not making a decision until the subsequent meeting at the soonest.
But we are secret lead agency for both.
We are
right?
lead agency for that one as well, yes.
Yeah. I will just, to answer the councilwoman's question on the traffic, both of these studies should sort of cross-consider each other. Both of these projects should cross-consider each other's traffic. When you do seeker, you're supposed to consider reasonably anticipated developments. And so I would say both of these are reasonably anticipated. Usually one comes before the other. And in this case, they're both here at the same time. So they really should, when showing baseline, and they say, we're going to add this amount, they should also say, and also this one here is going to add this amount, and this is what this is going to look like, all said and done.
So, Chris, I will request that when you talk to Terry Rice to review these, ask him to make sure that the two are consistent with each other in that they are using the proper numbers from each of their proposed trip generations in the other.
Yeah, I mean, the other one's got a 2-month lead on the other. I can tell you that the one for Lehigh Station Road mixed-use development was not aware of this aptitude project, when they put their application in. So I can guarantee those numbers are not in there. We can ask them to add that and run a new scenario for it, if you want me to. Now, the aptitude one does have, as I stated before, all the information from the other ones.
Yeah, so
But if you want me to, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I'd like to do that, although I will say, as student housing, I don't see a ton of impact. Where it will become a bigger deal is when they go to do the industrial portion. And the, I guess one of the things we could potentially do is, if we're concerned about that, when we approve the special use permit, Don, correct me if I'm wrong on this, can we approve for the mixed use development special use permit for aptitude for the Larkin parcel? Can we put a requirement that they have to come back in front of us for approval for the industrial portion prior to building it out? In other words, normally it doesn't require a special use permit, but can we put some condition on the mixed use special use permit that requires that they do come in front of us? Because I sort of look at that, like I wouldn't want a use in there that has heavy truck usage.
Yeah, I think certainly we can do that. The other thing I would say is, when we're doing all this traffic assessment, they should have some proposed industrial development,
Right.
to put their trips in for that.
It'll certainly be typical, but my point is, I want to,
Right. It might, when you get the specifics, it might change things for
Right,
the better
and-
or worse.
and I might want to, again, I would want to put some restriction on it, but I'm a little afraid of putting a hard restriction on it now without knowing what they're looking at. Because again, as an example, I certainly wouldn't want it to be a trucking depot, right?
Right.
Because a bunch of trucks going in and out there would be horrible. Now, with that said, if they could get a road over to John Street or Wiregrass, then those concerns largely go away, because those roads can handle the trucks. East River Road cannot. And so that's some of what I would want to take a look at. If we couldn't require them to come back, then I would try to think up as many of those restrictions now and put them on now. But if we can punt down the road to when they have a proposed tenant, I'm happy to talk about that and make sure that they understand when they're looking for a tenant, to try to find somebody that isn't, it's more of an office park than it is like a warehouse. Again, even one truck a day, I'm not worried about, but something that sees a bunch of trucks coming in and out, I think that would be problematic at that location.
And it's going to require site plan review down the road anyways, once they actually go to develop it.
Correct.
If that review sees that the seeker isn't consistent with what we did here because it's increased traffic, it would be required to undergo further seeker review.
Okay. Does that answer your questions, or at least address what we're going over?
I think that it helps inform it, but I still, have reservations about, there's a lot of implying with the data, because we don't have any concrete counts for a significant period of time. So we have to infer a lot of information.
So just so you're clear, that's standard. It is rare that projects ever go out and get brand new counts. They use the latest counts. And again, the county hasn't been taking new counts since COVID started, which is only a year old. I don't know when the last counts were for this area. We can find out that answer and have it for you at the, when we get to that meeting. Again, it has nothing to do with our action Wednesday, which is just declaring lead intent. But
So-
as it comes to you know, when it comes to the special use permit, we can get that for you.
I think it should inform the applicants of both the projects, but I think we already reviewed that. This is student housing, so are they going to be here to speak to us on Wednesday? Because student housing can mean a lot of different things to different.
These guys are not going to be here this Wednesday. Again, all we're doing is declaring our lead intent. There's no
Okay.
decision. We're just saying, announcing to the world that we're going to take the lead on the seeker on this.
Okay,
And other agencies have 30 days to say, you know what, I want to be involved, interested, or I should be the lead. I don't know of anybody else who would want to take the lead. I guarantee you, Monroe County DOT will absolutely want to be an involved agency. That's all we're doing at this point. One of the things we've talked about is when we have them scheduled, we are going to put them last on the list of the special use permit hearings because I want our interpreter to show up. Because it's student housing, there's potentially a number of, any of the special use permits that have to have a potential impact on a number of individuals in the deaf and hard of hearing community, like Riverton, like student housing. We want to have an interpreter there. So they will be last on the agenda for that special use permit. We'll have our interpreter who normally comes in for the town boards come in early to cover that. But there'll be plenty of opportunity to ask all those questions. And again, I'm laying the groundwork with them now that, well, first off, this will be one that they won't even be able to have a decision by the first meeting in March because the 30 days will not have expired. So the reason we still want them to come in for the hearing sooner is that gives us more time to digest. And if there are a bunch of unanswered questions that they need to go back and answer, we can keep the hearing open and make them come back. So even though there's no way we'll be ready to rule on it, we were going to have them at the meeting on the 24th for their special use presentation. So that way you guys have lots of times to digest it, to push back on it, to get additional answers. Then on the first meeting on the 10th in March, again, it'll have been 28 days, not 30. So we won't even be able to issue a decision, render a decision then, unless miraculously all of the potential players write back and sign off and say, we don't need the 30 days. That never happens. In fact, usually what happens is on day 29, we get, maybe even day 31, we get I want to be an interested party. Nobody ever takes over the lead, but like I said, we're supposed to know who all the people who want to be involved are, or interested at that point. So like I said, from a decision-making standpoint, I don't see this happening until the March 24th meeting is the earliest I see us being able to make a decision on this due to seeker. Especially because, right, some seekers are pretty simple. From a traffic standpoint, this one will not be because of all the traffic that it potentially dumps out onto East River Road, especially, like I said. The student housing I'm not as concerned about because as we've seen from other student housing projects in the area, they don't add a whole lot of traffic, COVID or no COVID. In addition, if they can get that other entrance in place, in my opinion, that helps tremendously from a seeker standpoint, because now if vehicles turning southbound are doing so at a light that's located at the bottom of a hill with good visibility in both directions, that alleviates a lot of those concerns. So there's a lot of questions that have to be answered, in my opinion, before we can render a decision. But as I pointed out, since the earliest we can render a decision is 28 plus 14 days away. Actually, it's even longer than that because there's Maybe not. No, I take it back. That's April. Never mind. Scratch that. So it's 28 plus 14, 38, 42 days away. So there's a lot of time to get those questions answered before, again, that's the earliest we could make a decision. Anything else on aptitude?
Well, just on the student one,
Yep.
every time we talk about student housing, we always hear about the shuttles they have. Do they provide us with any information on what percentage of students use that?
We do, and
Because I mean, they all seem to, you go into those parking lots and there's a lot of cars in those parking lots.
Sure there
That
are.
doesn't mean they're all driving to the school. but
Right.
That doesn't mean they're all taking the bus either.
right. So do we have any kind of reporting requirements? No, I don't know that we legally can, but I can certainly ask them for
Okay.
that data.
If it impacts
Especially-
our traffic assessment, we can build in conditions into the special use permit.
Yeah,
I
so
think we've done that.
we
Yeah.
did that with the Hill, I want to say.
Yeah, we required them to have a
Right.
shuttle bus, but we don't know how many people actually, my question is how many people
I will-
actually use it?
I will tell you with the fact that RIT is now charging for your parking permit on campus, the fact that they are pushing anyone in, if you're in one of those nearby student apartments, they make you park out in parking lot B. If you don't know where that is, it's over off of, it's right next to the Building 99, which is right near John Street. So you pretty much have to take a shuttle from the parking lot anyways to get to class. So why wouldn't you take a shuttle from the apartments? So I don't have hard numbers from it, but again, pre-COVID, I used to drive that corridor a decent amount, and I rarely saw traffic coming in and out from any of the student housing other than the shuttles. And even today, so same thing, I drive by the RIT and Conference Center, which is another student housing. I rarely see cars coming in and out. I see the shuttle bus coming in and out all the time. So I do think their data is accurate. That doesn't mean kids don't have cars, right? They show up in the car parks there. If they're going to go out shopping or do other stuff, they'll absolutely take the car. The key is that they won't typically do that during the peak driving times, which is when the traffic, when you look at all the stuff from the traffic mitigation, those are the times we're concerned because the road has capacity at other times. But at the two peak times is when the capacity's at its minimum, just because it's so full. So like I said, that my personal observations back up what the reports have been saying, but I will see if we can get some hard data. The good news is, like I said, the hearings for this Wednesday, they've done 2 of the other projects. So they probably can get us data on the Lodge and the Hill. Any other questions on those? Item 5. So this one's potentially an action item, or we can punt it to do it at Wednesday's meeting. It doesn't really require a resolution per se, although we will be taking a vote. Basically, if you remember, we modified the special use permit for Joe Legnos to allow him to do to basically go from a service garage with gas pumps to a gas station with a service garage to a gas station with a convenience store. Their original idea was they were going to do everything within the footprint of the existing building. When they got their coolers, the coolers were really big. And so they wanted to put them on the outside of the building. And the question is, do we feel that that change is enough to warrant that they come back to update their special use permit? Or do we just allow the planning board to handle it from a site plan standpoint? Either way, their site plan definitely has to be updated. The question is whether we believe it's enough of a modification to make them come back in front of us for their special use permit.
Well, I don't believe that they didn't know the size of the coolers wouldn't fit in the building. I mean, they claim they own eight other gas stations. They must have done some remodeling before in the past, and all of a sudden, oh, we pressed them on the issue of the size of the place many times, and I think it was at least 5 times that they said that it was going to be the same size.
Except, Mike, I will say, don't ascribe motives. You don't know motives. You
I-
don't know
I-
what they do or don't.
Well, if you don't know the size of your coolers when you're buying a building, there's problems. If you have 8 kids, you don't buy a 2-bedroom home. For the most part.
You'd be surprised.
So.
You say
well,
for the
or
most
maybe
part.
I should say,
Let's ask our realtor here.
maybe I should say 8 kids, you don't get a studio apartment. Maybe that's a better one. But anyways, yeah, and last, and the attorney did say if there were any changes, they would have to come back to this board and ask Don if that was correct, and Don did say that was correct.
Right. So that's why I'm asking, do we want to make them come back? Do we see this as enough of a change to make them come back?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other discussion before I just call a roll call? Okay. So basically the question is whether we're going to require White Arrow Service Station and Mini Mart to come back in front to update their special use permit. An aye vote means you want them to appear. Becky, could you call the roll?
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford.
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Okay, so we will need to notify them that they will have to get on our schedule to update their special use permit. Any other questions, comments on that? So I did include a plan showed the parcel immediately behind them. It shows them as, in fact, it shows there's a road there. The road, it's a paper road. Because of the wetlands, the road was never brought all the way through to East River Road, and I don't think ever will. So the lot behind them, I don't see as ever being developed. So when we get into the discussion, I just want you to have that map, have the other plans that they've got coming in.
Yep.
Because it's to me, in other words, if they were putting it on the north side and that was moving closer to the houses there, to me, that'd be a bigger deal than it moving to the west. It's not in the wetlands, but again, that whole area behind them is wetlands, so they're not disturbing neighbors.
The coolers that they're looking to put in, are those coolers that are like for soda or are
Soda,
they
beer,
backup coolers for like backup products?
No, it's cooler. So the idea is they were originally looking to put them into the store. They couldn't, it took up too much of the real estate. They couldn't get a layout that they liked where it all fit. So they're essentially, the doors of the cooler are the back wall of the existing building. The coolers then stick out, and then they are going to essentially put a wall and dormer roof over it so that they can come around. I don't know that it's going to be conditioned space. That's something we should ask. But I think that it's going to be covered space so that they can essentially go around the back and load the coolers from the back.
And these are just the coolers when you go in, okay, I want a Coke, I want a Pepsi.
Exactly. That's my understanding anyway.
Okay, I was just curious. 'cause
Becky
I'm
or
looking
Chris,
at
I don't know if you have any more details on that.
I thought it almost sounded like a walk-in because of the size of it, but maybe
It
wrong.
looks,
It's a walk behind, not a walk in.
so it's adding, well, it's 684.
Steve,
Yep.
square feet.
Kevin Wilson, Director of Building Fire Prevention. Yeah, they're looking to put in reach-in coolers like you described. They're actually going to be building an addition, walls and a roof over them. And it's just convenience of them loading it from the backside. So there's like a 3-foot walkway around the backside of the coolers.
So it will be conditioned space.
Well, it's either gonna be conditioned or just the condensers from the equipment's gonna keep that space tempered anyway.
Yep.
But coolers are self-contained, but there is a roof and walls around them.
Right.
Similar to what you see in the dairy department at Wegmans where people are behind billing from the back. Is that what?
That's correct. Yep.
Kevin, I just want to make sure, when I talked to you probably 2 months ago, 3 months ago, this is the project that, that started working without any permits, and you had to put a stop work order on it?
That's correct. They started doing some demo work inside and I shut them down.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that? Anything on, it looks like none of the other items are selected. Is there anything anyone wanted to talk about them, or should we move? Oh, one of the things I'll note, oh, see, she didn't even have it on here.
No, she didn't. I
You already
saw
had it
that
on there,
afterwards,
yeah.
yeah, so.
Mike was going to ask if we could move the approval of the minutes to the Wednesday meeting, but it looks
Yeah.
like you already had done that.
Yeah, we got them.
He emailed that.
Yeah. Okay, so the, again, barring any further discussion, we would then move to executive session regarding the appointment of an individual. And then we would adjourn straight from there. So unless there's anything else, we'll adjourn to that and we'll end the transmission. And we will adjourn directly from executive session.
Second, or so moved.
So moved. There you go.
Second. I was like, second did who first?
Okay, hearing no objections, we will adjourn to executive session.